Hey everybody, welcome to the Downpour, Emerald City Hockey Seattle Torrent podcast. RJ, it feels weird to be starting another podcast. It's been a while since we've had to do this.
It does. I mean, going back to the start of Red Glare, which was years ago at this point, I don't know. It feels new. I like how you did the intro where it sounds very much like the deep dive. So it's at
Mhm.
least familiar to me. It didn't freak me out too much, right? Can't be too new. But I'm so excited to start this podcast talking about the Seattle Torrent. Both of us big women's hockey fans. We love the sport, and we've been following it for years. Been following the PWHL since its existence, and now Seattle has a team and we get to cover it.
Yeah, I'm super pumped to be able to cover the Seattle Torrent, to be able to do this podcast and provide, same coverage we give to the Kraken, be able to give that to the Torrent and be able to communicate with the community through this platform, just like we do with the deep dive for the Kraken. We got the downpour here for the Torrent. We're still getting up and running with everything over here on the Torrent side of our coverage of the ECH coverage. Probably already heard there is no intro like theme to this podcast yet. Not a lot of branding around it yet. We were really waiting for the team branding so that then we could work on our branding around that. Of course, Torrent just unveiled last week. So we haven't had a ton of time to be able to build everything out yet for what this is going to be. So it's still a tiny bit of a work in progress, but got to get out there. We got to start talking about the team, and we didn't want to have to wait anymore. That and regular season starts a week from Friday.
Yeah, we're on a tight timeline. The team is on a tight timeline. I mean, stuff is getting ready to go. And so there's plenty we need to cover, or else we're going to get left way behind.
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna jump in here, and the first thing we're gonna talk about, RJ. Well, I guess we'll talk about the podcast a little bit more. I mean, I want to just dive in and start talking about the team and how everything's going through 2 whole days of training camp now. But for people tuning in, this podcast is not going to be as regimented in schedule as the deep dive. We're going to kind of go as the season goes for the Seattle Torrent, because PWHL schedule is not as regular as the NHL schedule. There's like gaps, and sometimes there's a lot of games in a short amount of time. Sometimes there's a longer time between games. So we're going to kind of be like kind of following their schedule, and that's how our content will work here on the downpour. That being said, here in the short term, there should be a lot because we've got training camp this week. They've got the preseason games over this upcoming weekend, and then next week, a couple days more of camp before, like I said, next Friday happens and we're into the season. Games will be played and underway. So really excited about all of that going on, but just wanted to kind of throw that out there for everybody.
Yeah, it's good so everyone knows what to expect. And exactly, we're going to go kind of along with what the schedule and the way the season demands of us. So it's a little different than the NHL. Just the pacing is going to feel different, certainly for us. But as far as, the general style of the coverage in the podcast, if you know us already, you know more or less what to expect. We're going to talk about the Torrent the same way we talk about the Kraken on the deep dive and the rest of the league on the Red Glare podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So let's dig into it. We'll get to our early camp thoughts because, again, there's only been 2 days of camp, so there's not a ton to go off of there yet. But first, we're going to talk about the team branding, RJ, because obviously this team was announced a long time ago now, right? It feels like forever ago that we were at CPA for the announcement that Seattle was in fact getting the PWHL expansion team alongside Vancouver, and that those teams would be coming at that unveiling, or the announcement of all of that, which was several months ago now. They had said that they were hoping to have team branding, team name, team logo, all of that stuff in time for the season to start, and sure enough, PWHL kept their word. We have the Seattle Torrent name, we have the logo, we have got the branding, we've got merch out there and available for everybody to buy at places like the Armory or at the team store at KCI. I believe there's some at the Lair as well at CPA. So all of that stuff's been great. Let's dig into it, because when frankly we helped leak the the team name and branding last week, RJ, which already feels like a long time ago. It was maybe a little controversial, we'll say. I think it's taken everybody a minute maybe to warm up to the name of Torrent and the logo with the S, the watery S and the torrent running through it. I think it's safe to say it was a little controversial.
I think so. And definitely judging by the reaction that we got, whether it was on our Instagram posts or anywhere on social media, the reaction I'd say was mixed to the team name, to the logo. I think the reaction to the name was maybe a little bit better than to the
Mhm.
logo, at least just personally from what I saw. But it's the kind of thing that, I think a lot of fans were deciding still how they wanted to feel about it. And I think there were some strong emotions early on too, because you have this idea of whatever it's going to be in your head, and also the fact that I think they went with a name that nobody really saw coming. It was
Mhm.
not one of the. I don't know about you, Dylan. It wasn't one of the names that I thought about as potential names for this team. The Kraken released a video shortly after the logo and everything leaked, with the players talking about some possibilities, and of course, Torrent was not mentioned by any of the players either. And so I think it's going to take a little extra time too, because it's not like Sockeye or one of the other names
Right.
that, or Olympics or anything like that, that other people are considering.
Right. And I think what's interesting with it, because obviously Seattle is not the only team coming in. You do have the Vancouver team. It's not too surprising in the sense that all of the PWHL names, right, for the original six franchises were kind of more almost like ideas or feels or stuff that happens around, right? Like rather than say naming a team after an animal specifically, right? Like kind of proper noun things. It wasn't really kind of how the league had handled most of the branding up to that point. So the idea of going with something like Torrent kind of made sense in that standpoint, or at least it fit in. Of course, then you go and you get Vancouver and they get Golden Eyes after the yellow eyes of a duck. And aquatic bird is what they want to say, and I'll
Yeah.
get on board with that. But um, and that's like a very specific thing, and so it's a little odd that for Seattle they kind of stick with the more conventional PWHL naming thing, go with more of the idea of a feel of something rather than with something specific like the Golden Eyes got in Vancouver. Never probably know why the league made that decision. I mean, that is one of the things that is different about the PWHL from the NHL is the fact that all of these franchises in the PWHL are owned by the league. These do not have individual ownership groups that are then going to go out there and, potentially canvas the fan base and all of that kind of stuff to come up with names. You don't have an owner bringing their own thoughts to it, right? Like we saw with the Golden Knights, where Bill Foley was very much, wanting to go with the Black Knights thing, had to pivot to Golden Knights. That's not really how this league works. That's not how this expansion setup works, where this is a league owned franchise and the league then takes charge of the branding for all of their teams and kind of goes with it from there. So for anybody who is not aware of that, or you're coming over from like the NHL side of things are a little bit different over with the PWHL. Um, that being said, I think the big controversy and the first thing that I thought of when we got the name of Torrent was I of course thought of like file sharing, right? Like
I think a lot of people did.
that's the only context that I've ever used the word torrent in. Not that I would partake, of course, but that's the only like time I've ever heard the word. That's the only time I've ever communicated the word in any way was through file sharing. And it's Seattle. It's known as a tech place, right? It's one of the more, major tech hubs in the United States. And so I was like, I mean, maybe they're playing on that a little bit. So far, none of the branding has gone anywhere close to that. I don't think they want to touch that, but one can't help but kind of connect those two dots.
Yeah, I'll admit it was my first thought as well when I heard the name. I think a lot of people probably that's their primary association. Certainly, if you're of our generation, that's just something that was common that you maybe grew up with, and so I think that's a bit of an uphill battle branding wise, and certainly, well, one thing actually, I went and just Googled Seattle Torrent because I wanted to see how they were doing SEO wise.
Yeah.
Because when they announced the team name, or like when it leaked, I went to just search it and everything, and it was all file sharing
Yeah.
results. But now at least they're the entire first page of Google
Good.
because there's a lot of news around them and everything. So I'm happy to see that. But I think it is something that that you're going to have maybe some fans making jokes about, or maybe leaning into a little bit. I mean, look, Dylan, I think we saw, not to make my first Kraken comparison on this podcast, but I mean, sure, I'll do it. But like, I think we saw some of that stuff with Kraken as well, and
Yeah.
and the word Kraken, all that stuff. You might see some allusions to it, but it certainly won't ever be, I think, from the team side.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you mentioned Googling it when the leak kind of happened. And I just wanted to see like, okay, you know, outside of file sharing, torrent, the only time I've ever heard of it, thought of it, is really in the concept of torrential,
The word
right?
would be torrential, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like referring to, I don't know, a torrential downpour. Maybe that's why we named the podcast this. You could only speculate at home. And so I was like, well, what is the actual definition of torrent? And I of course Googled torrent, and it was all file sharing sites. So then I had to put in definition, and the definition that Google gives is a strong and fast moving stream of water or other liquid. At the time last week, I was like, okay, that's, I get it. That's something. I think when they did the official announcement and the official unveiling late last week at Mopop, and we get that video that the team puts out narrated by Hillary Knight, and it has all of the, stock footage of the Pacific Northwest, the mountains, the rivers, all of that kind of stuff. That is what kind of made it make sense to me, where it was like, okay, you're talking about the water that helps like shape the land and help shape the region and how it fits into the region, and that like really kind of made it all work for me in a way that it just wasn't before. And I haven't really had an issue with the name since we got that video from the team and since we had that kind of official unveiling.
Right. And I like the storytelling aspect of it too, because I think with any name, you kind of have to tell the story around it. If I'll do another crack comparison, but it's look, it's the reference that we have for an
Yeah.
expansion team coming in where they've announced a name and it's like what we're familiar with. And so that's
Right.
the only
Yeah.
reason I bring it up. There will not be a ton of cracking comparisons in this podcast, but I think for branding, for a name coming in,
Yes.
especially in the city of Seattle, I think it is apt here to mention it. But there's the storytelling aspect of like, from the depths, mysterious creature comes up, and they've done a really good job storytelling and building around it. And I think the torrent have probably, at least early on, maybe even done a better job of building around it and explaining the name and doing that job storytelling. And also they're very consistent on it, whether it is the coach, the GM, anybody talking about it. What are they talking about, right? It's like a powerful force, and
Yep.
everyone was saying the same things, and so they made sure that everybody is on the same page with what the name means and what the storytelling is behind it.
Yeah, they definitely have. I'm, you know, waiting for camp and the season to get underway so that we could start talking about the team identity away from just it being a force, because that's so far all we've gotten from anybody. But we'll get there. We'll get there. So for me anyway, the name has, it fits already. I think of the team as Seattle Torrents. I'm good with that. I wasn't somebody who like was building up a name in my mind already. And from what I could kind of gather looking at that initial reaction online, it felt like the people that were kind of the most invested already in this PWHL expansion team coming to Seattle were the ones that had maybe the strongest reaction against it at first. And I think that that's because they had already, they've spent months workshopping names in their head, and this one comes out of left field, and it just felt very different. It's just not a word anybody was used to, like we talked about, and it kind of hit everybody. But for me anyway, and it feels like for most people at this point, Seattle Torrent, the name, all that stuff is solid. Where I'm maybe not as solid, RJ, is on the logo. And I don't know how you feel about it, but
I'm with you.
it has not grown on me quite the same way as the team name.
Yeah, I'm with you on the logo. And so the logo was also kind of revealed in that leak and then officially a couple days later. And for those of you who haven't seen it, although I'm sure if you're listening to this, you probably have seen it. It is an S, and I think it's meant to be like a torrent of water
Mhm.
in the shape of an S, and then the word mark torrent right in front of it. And yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the logo. It's okay. It's not bad. It doesn't go out of
Right.
its way to be bad, but I think it's very generic. And certainly, if you remove the word mark, like it needs the word mark to prevent it from being like incredibly generic.
Yes.
I don't know. It blends into the background for me. I think it was a bit of a missed opportunity too, given all the directions you could go with torrent and all the ways that you
Mm.
can express that concept. To just go with the standard S logo, it feels like the most basic way they could have taken it.
Right. And look, S logo, pretty iconic for Seattle sports. You think of the Mariners, it's an S logo. You think of the Kraken, it's an S logo, although it is stylized around, the tentacles and the red eye and stuff for the Kraken. I'm down with the idea of them going with an S logo because it just adds them to other Seattle sports teams. Like that's just part of Seattle sports is to have some sort of logo like that. So I'm okay with the idea of the S logo. What I don't love about it is the word mark going through it, because I feel like, the Kraken don't do that, Mariners don't do that. Like you shouldn't need to do that. If you
I
kind
think
of
that
add,
shows. Sorry, I,
yeah.
the word mark there, I think, is already, if it needs to be there, it kind of shows a failure from the rest of the logo.
Right. I feel like then it means that you did not do enough to, add enough unique design elements to the rest of the logo where it can kind of stand on its own. The Mariners have the compass, the Kraken have the tentacles and the red eye. Like when you do that kind of stuff, it can really stand apart, and it can hold its own as that S, and people can look at it, recognize it, and see it as representing the torrent. And right now, the way the S is designed, it just doesn't do that. And you and I both immediately, kind of last week when it leaked, we like removed the word mark. People on the Discord kind of filled it in, and it's just a watery S, basically, is it, right? Like is what it turns into, and it just isn't much there. There's not a lot going on color wise, right? You're just using basically two team colors, and that's it. And it just, yeah, it leaves a little bit to be desired. And where that really hit home for me, because I was working on like trying to like it, and like, okay, I'm building up to it, is when we see the team personnel on the ice, the coaching staff, or the jacket that Todd Lewicki's wearing around KCI right now, right? And you look at the coaching staff and the jackets they're wearing or the hats they're wearing, and it is just that S Torrent logo, and it feels removed from so much else of what this team's identity is, which primarily for me is the slate green. Jerseys are leaning into the slate green. The gear for the players is leaning in to the slate green. You look at their helmets, the gloves, the pants, it all looks fantastic. That slate green is such a unique color. You go back to the PWHL Seattle logo that we had before you had the Torrent name, and it was the slate green. This logo doesn't really have the slate green. It's just an outline. And so when you just then see it on a field of black, just, a little logo on a jacket or on a hat, it doesn't feel like it's part of everything else with this team. And when I see it on the logo, that logo on the jacket or on a hat, it just kind of, like, my eyes don't focus on it. I don't think of this team still, even when it's on, the head coach, Steve O'Rourke, right? Like it's kind of odd, but I think thinking about it these last 2 days at camp, the thing for me that is missing is the slate green, because instead it is just the kind of river blue, to use the official names of these colors.
Exactly. And it doesn't really pop either a ton. I think it's the kind of logo that's going to look a lot better if you were to just paste it on the jersey that they have already, get rid of
Yeah,
the diagonal Seattle and just put it on the front. I think it'll look good
it
because the
will.
blue contrasts with the slate green,
Yep.
and the slate green is still the star of the show. But on those jackets, on any of the other things that the coaches wear, it's just that logo having to stand on its own, and it doesn't do a very good job of that. And so, I mean, I was looking at the store in the Armory after the name announcement, looking at the different merch, and yeah, I didn't really like it on some of the sweatshirts. They like a polo shirt, it just doesn't work great standing on its own. But on the main T-shirt that they had in front, where it was the Torrent logo on the green, on that slate green, and the
Hmm.
whole shirt was that color, then it looked good on it. And so I think it really does rely on having that green background. But as a logo, you kind of want it to look good regardless of the background it's on. Certainly for merch purposes, people might want something in gray or black or
Right.
whatever it is.
Yeah, no, I 1,000% agree with you. I think it's going to look really good on a jersey. We'll get to talking about the jerseys that they're going to be having here for season one in just a bit, but I'm very much with you. And yeah, for the most part, I like most of the merch options as well and everything there. It's just when it comes to certain things, like what the coaching staff has to wear out there, the athletic gear, what is it called? It's kind of like
Yeah.
tracksuits almost.
Yeah, like tracksuits, sweats. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's odd too, because I mean, I'm a water guy, right? Like everything, my favorite places are all the water. And I love kind of how they're going about it. You know, you go to the Seattle Torrent website and you go down, if you scroll down, talk about the colors. I love the slate green, like we already mentioned. It very much does feel like the ocean up here. I like the idea of having like the glacier blue, the river blue, the off white, which I'm a big fan of. And this goes back to a lot of discussions around when we got the initial team colors at that PWHL expansion announcement. I'm a huge fan of that, and the fact that they call it foam and it's kind of reminiscent of the beach, and you know, kind of looking at the sand through that thin layer of water and foam that comes up as the waves come in, and at the very top of where the water starts on a beach. Like, I love all of it. It's just and so I'm kind of surprised that I don't love this more when it's just so many elements of my personality put into something, and I'm having a hard time getting on board with it.
Yeah, no, I think that says a lot. Not to harp on the logo too much more, but I do want to push back a little bit on just that it has to be kind of the S because it's iconic in
Yeah, no,
Seattle
it doesn't
sports.
have to be, but I think it
Not that it has to be.
works.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the Mariners and the Kraken, but like beyond that, I know the Sonics in their last iteration had an S logo, but for most of the time they didn't. The Seahawks don't, the Storm don't, Sounders don't. I just don't know that it's as as ubiquitous a thing in Seattle sports as maybe if you're trying to defend the logo, you might say.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it is. I still think, obviously I think about the Kraken logo a lot because of our
Yeah,
job, but I still, when I think of Seattle sports, the first thing that comes to mind is the Mariners logo. And maybe that's different for other people, but like for me, that's kind of the way it's always been. And so
I mean they're
I
number one in the city. That would make
Right,
sense.
right. And so I always personally associate Seattle sports with an S logo.
Yeah.
And then I think working covering the Kraken for the last 5 years has even more so cemented that. But yeah, that is very much a results may vary thing. I agree with you.
And then one more point on the jerseys that you mentioned, but I just want to echo it. I love that foam color. Absolutely love
It's
the
so
foam
good.
color and love that they went with it as the primary color for their away jerseys.
Yeah, so we can transition into the away jerseys here. I love these jerseys. Going to the announcement for the jersey reveal, seeing them in person, seeing all of the photos and the branding and stuff that the team has done since then, right? The photo shoots with the players and everything, wearing them around town and everything. The jerseys look incredible, and they are done in the style of the way all the PWHL jerseys were done for their inaugural season, where it just has the city name kind of diagonal down the jersey, but it's in team branding colors. The logo for the Torrent is not on there. There's nothing on the jerseys that says Torrent yet. That will all come next season. But for this season, they do have Seattle. I love both home and away. It's kind of unusual for me to be on board with both a home and an away jersey, but I'm really on board with both of these.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think just the colors do so much of the work. We talked about how much we love the colors, and I think these jerseys showcase the colors really well. We didn't see the jerseys necessarily on the ice for the first couple of days of training camp, but we saw the gloves, the pants, the
Mhm.
helmets, things like that. And that color, the slate green, it just looks so good. You even were trying to nudge me like, hey, it's like Sharks teal, but better. And I was like, well, hey, it was how the Sharks teal was when it was better than it is now. So I'll give you that. Um, but absolutely love the colors, and yeah, for home and away, they both look fantastic. I don't know what more to say because it's a fairly generic design as far as the
Yeah.
jerseys go, but it lets the colors do the work, and they've picked fantastic colors.
Right. Again, just like with the other PWHL teams, and because like, all these teams are owned by the league, and the league is operating as one large entity, the design elements are right. They're exactly the same. Like, all the teams follow the same thing. They all have the uh, the stripes on the arms that go about 75% away or the way around. There's that kind of gap in the middle that I know was controversial last year when it was introduced and everybody saw those. But I think that everything else design element wise just matches what the rest of the league is doing. And then with the colors, the slate green looks fantastic. Using the foam for the nameplate and numbers on the back looks really good. What I find really interesting is on the away jerseys, is you get the slate green name and numbers on the back. I think both styles, it's going to be very easy to identify players on the ice. You're going to be able to see the numbers anyway very clearly on broadcast. Probably not going to be able to read the names, but you can't, normally on a broadcast. Um, On the away jerseys, though, the slate green name and numbers has a little bit of a shine to it. There's like a little metallic to it that really, sparkles and pops. We were outside for the jersey reveal, so it definitely caught the sunshine that was out there for that. But I think even inside under the bright lights at CPA, you're going to see that at times as they skate by, as the players maneuver, you're going to see the light hit that and the glare kind of reflect off of the shine that those numbers have, and it creates a really cool effect because we don't get that really in the NHL at all. There's nobody that has kind of shiny nameplates or shiny numbers outside of some specialty jerseys. I mean, I think of the original Stadium Series jerseys were kind of that way because again they were played outside. You needed something that could help catch the light a little bit, but I really appreciated that little touch when I got to see them up close.
Yeah, I mean the Golden Knights do go overboard with. They just make the entire jersey
Yeah.
try and shine and sparkle, and that's too much. So don't like it there. But yeah, love the little element here with these jerseys. And yeah, I haven't had the chance to really see them outside yet. I've seen fans wearing the jerseys around, kind of in
Mhm.
the daylight, and they look great on the fans too. The ones that have gotten them so far.
Yeah, I know a lot of the discussion around the jerseys when they were unveiled, both from the players as well as the rest of us in the media that were kind of covering it. It feels just like a good Seattle lifestyle brand, basically, right? Like
You
you
could
could,
wear this out around the city, and like you'd get like positive looks. I think it'd get some
yeah,
attention in a good way.
yeah, exactly.
But it would fit in, but it'd also get some attention.
Exactly, and so I think they really hit it out of the park with the way that these look and the way they're designed and having that. I said it at the time, and I do think now that we have the branding, I stand by this. I think if I was somebody buying a jersey, and I don't know that the away jerseys ever actually went up for sale. Let me hop over to their team shop because I think that was part of it was that they just had the home jerseys, and I know those have largely sold out. You can only get a couple of players left with the home jerseys.
Are you
Um,
going to talk about your strategy for this year and
yes,
next if you were? Yeah.
yes. What I would do if I was getting a jersey is I would probably get the away jersey this year that says Seattle and rock that. And again, you can't right now, so sorry if I'm like putting this out there and you really want to follow it. And then next year get the branded jersey that's going to say Torrent, have the logo on it, and be in that slate green because I think that that's going to look really really good next year and this year the foam and everything I think is going to work out, and I don't totally know how the Torrent logo is going to work on the foam away jerseys quite yet. That it doesn't seem as right at the moment.
Yeah. No, I think that's the way to go. As soon as it's possible, I think that's the way to go if you're looking to get a jersey this season and next. And as much as I like the home ones and that slate green, I still like the away jerseys better. If I had to pick, I'd go with the away ones.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the last thing on the jerseys, just because this was something that when they were unveiled, a lot of people talked about, are they too similar to the Boston Fleet? Because you're kind of going with a more green tinged, thing. Boston is obviously fully green. This is more of a green teal. And then one of your secondary colors is like a lighter blue, very similar to the Boston Fleet. Already have to deal with all the Boston Fleet copycat allegations when you steal general manager from their organization and a bunch of their players via the expansion draft. Do you do you think that that's an issue at all? I
After
don't really
seeing,
think it
yeah,
is.
well, no, because I understand, and that was something that I was a little concerned about once the colors were announced for the team, and especially just knowing all the fleet connections they have already. But I don't think it's an issue because you look at the colors and yeah, it is a little similar. I do think there's a pretty big difference between the slate green and the Boston Fleet green, but also you look at where that light blue is being used. And in the Fleet jerseys, it's up on the shoulders for the home ones,
Mhm.
and then the multiple stripes on the sleeves. Whereas the Seattle jerseys just kind of keep it down low at that bottom stripe. And then the big thing, and I think this is what is really necessary given the fleet setup, is that they've gone with that foam color as the primary for the away jersey instead of white. If it was
Yeah,
white, I think it would look way too much like a Boston Fleet jersey.
I agree. I totally agree with that. So, good stuff there. Anything else on the branding, jerseys, merch that you want to bring up? I will say if anybody doesn't follow Lexi Brown, on like TikTok, Instagram, whatever. But she put out a TikTok, and I think it was an Instagram reel and everything. There, she went down and picked up some merch, and one of the shirts does the way it's like designed. It's supposed to say like it's got Seattle running vertical on the side, and then Torrent twice kind of running horizontal across the jersey. But one of them, they're like trying to use the T from Seattle to be like the T for Torrent on the top one, but they're just not like lined up. They're 90 degrees from each other, and so it just kind of reads Orient Torrent. And she did one about that. Now whenever I see that shirt, and it's one of the ones at KCI, so I've seen it the last couple days, I can't help but think of the Seattle Orient Torrent.
Yep, it's certainly just torrent is a better name than Orient Torrent.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But it's a good
But I
shirt
think,
otherwise because it's got the slate green. I'm all in on this color, man.
yeah, no, I am too. I absolutely love the colors, and yeah, no, overall, love the jerseys, love the branding and all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so let's get into talking about the team. Only been 2 days of training camp so far. There hasn't been too much to see. I mean, today we maybe got a glimpse at what lines we can expect, but I'm not totally sure that they're what we should expect. So I don't know. We could talk about it a little bit, but I think it's going to be heavily, qualified with an asterisk
We'll
there.
throw in our usual disclaimer about you can
Yes.
never trust day one training camp lines. It's a fool's errand, but you can talk about them, but just know, take it with a big grain of salt.
Yeah. That being said, it probably still wouldn't shock me if day one opening lineup out there for the Seattle Torrent, that forward line is going to be a combination of Hillary Knight, Alex Carpenter, and Hannah Bilka, which is insane.
Just stacked, beyond stacked, that top line, if it does stay together. And you know what? Why wouldn't it? I mean, you have Hillary Knight and Bilka from Boston bringing over, and then Alex Carpenter, probably your best center on that line. Like, why wouldn't you keep that together?
I don't know. So I fully expect that. I'm sure that that's what will be seen by the teams in Vancouver this weekend for the preseason games, which there is not going to be a way for anybody to watch them. And I do think that this is, I mean, this is certainly frustrating for me. I'm sure it's frustrating for you on the media side of things because this is a very big deal. Like, not only is it the first time that this team is going to be playing, but it would go a long way for us answering a lot of the questions we have, right? And allowing us to talk about the team because we would have more definitive lines to go over. We'd have defensive pairings. We'd have an idea of what the goalie rotation is going to be and things like that. But unfortunately, there is going to be no way for fans or the media to view these preseason games this weekend, and so I don't really know how that's going to go down. I guess we'll just get box scores, and then next week when camp resumes, we're just going to have to ask the players like, hey,
What
what
happened?
happened? I saw you got a goal. Could you describe the play for me?
Yeah, could you just like walk me through it? Have a little whiteboard there. Could you just kind of like
Yeah.
draw up the diagram, how it happened? Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work. We're going to do our best, but yeah, not really sure. I mean, at least like as far as lines and things like that, hopefully we can, talk to Coach O'Rourke and maybe get some insight there. But I'm not really sure how we're gonna supposed to cover that.
Yeah, so that's gonna complicate things a little bit, and so I think for today we're probably not gonna talk too much about lineups and things like that because one, we haven't really seen anything yet, and the very first games that we're going to see from them we aren't going to see it, so we're going to have to kind of ask about it afterwards potentially. So but I did want to at least mention that yeah, for the moment it does feel like Alex Carpenter, Hillary Knight, Hannah Bilka are out there together, and I think that that's a lineup that a lot of people wanted to see, and so I just wanted to mention that because I know a lot of fans have been hoping for it. That is at least happening through the one day that we saw full 5-on-5 drills occur.
Yeah, and even if you are just at least a neutral women's hockey fan, watching that line together, the prospect of them potentially being together, that's pretty exciting.
It's really exciting. Yes, it is very, very exciting. As for other kind of camp takeaways here, I think the number one thing for me that has been the number one takeaway, having watched both days, has been how physical it is and how much head coach Steve O'Rourke wants to emphasize this team being a physical team that is going to go out there and really battle hard to be a force, right? To go back to what all the players and what he said last week. Every single drill for the most part, except for a couple late today, every single drill that they have run has started with some form of physical battle at the beginning of it, or ended it with it. But for the most part, they've all started that way. Like today we get breakout drills, but it starts with a board battle, or it starts with a corner battle, or it starts with a net front battle, right? A point shot net front battle, and then the other team collects the puck if they can. They're going to battle for it, and then they try to break out up the ice. That's just how every single drill so far has gone. And then we heard it from the players afterwards, where they talked about coach wants this team to be a physical team. They want to be a physical force out there. It seems like right now, RJ, that is our first glimpse at what the identity of the Seattle Torrent's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, CJ Jackson, when asked about it, used the word gritty.
Hmm.
First word, right? And so you can kind of see that early on in the drills, and it's something that I was going to say caught me by surprise, but I just wasn't expecting. I'd been used to early on in camp. There's not a ton of physicality from watching NHL stuff, but man, even just day two going out there today, and like, oh yeah, no, they're like battling for this puck, and it's intense. It definitely sets the tone there, and I liked a lot of the drills they were running, especially in small areas. Like I like the one that you pointed out to me where they kind of take just lengthwise basically a third of the ice and have players all kind of standing on one side, the boards are on the other side, and it's like a 3-on-3. You kind of just try and move up the ice. You compared it to an Oklahoma drill
Hmm.
in football, for those who know that one. And yeah, it looked kind of like that, and so we're like, I don't know what to call it. I was like, well, it's hockey, so maybe a Minnesota drill.
Yeah.
But I really liked that one. And so you can kind of see through some of the drills early on like the identity the team's trying to build.
Right. The drill that really stood out to me yesterday was a 1v1 battle drill. It started as a corner battle, transitioned then to a net front battle, and it was one forward versus one defender, and the defender had to play with their stick upside down, right? Holding it upside down. So they're holding the blade up with their dominant hand, and just the end bit of their stick is on the ice, and that was done to get the defenders to play physical, to play the body, right? You can't just poke check the stick, the puck away from the forward. You had to really go after them. And I posted that on Twitter and stuff. That is something that I've never seen before, but that's something I would absolutely steal if I was coaching a team, really at any age. I would totally teach my defenders to play that way, because that is such an important part of this sport. I mean, we talked about it on the deep dive with Ryan Lindgren in regards to the Tyler Sagan goal, right? This past week, you play the body. Like that's what you do. If you're a defender, you got to play the body. You can't play the puck. And I thought that one-on-one drill was great for kind of reinforcing that, building that habit for the defenders for the Torrent, and it led to some really incredible battles between players, and it was really really exciting to watch.
Definitely. I mean, Dylan, did you ever use a drill like that when, because we were both squirt hockey coaches, so we
Yeah.
coached like kids, and that was one of the things we tried to instill was playing the body. And I remember for my team, because like my previous coach used it when I was growing up, where we just had to get rid of the sticks entirely. Like defense does not
Yeah.
have a stick. And so I would use that with my younger players to kind of teach them how to play the body. And it's never too late, or you're never too old to run that drill and kind of, be familiar with that concept.
Right, and I think that this is a, kind of a better form of that, right?
Mhm.
Where when you get rid of the stick, because yeah, that's something that I grew up with too. It you're not you're I mean, you're using your arms in a way that you wouldn't in a real game
Right, the second
situation.
hand, yeah, kinda
Yeah,
comes around, and there's a lot of clutching and grabbing in a way that you wouldn't even think to do and couldn't do.
right, and yeah, and you would risk a penalty and things like that, and so I think doing it this way is, I think, the way that I would, if I was to go back to coaching, kind of run it forward, or the way I would advise somebody getting into coaching to run it, because I feel like it's going to help with the muscle memory for that defender to go out there, because you are still holding a stick and all of that, but you're learning how to get away with not using it to try to separate that opposing forward from the puck. I don't know, but it was a great drill. But we're seeing lots of that kind of stuff so far in camp. That's been really the number one takeaway. There's been the standard kind of conditioning stuff. We saw a pretty extensive bag skate at the end of camp yesterday. but that's all the kind of stuff that you would expect from a training camp, especially when you have 6 days on the ice before the regular season starts. That's all they have. And that
It's
is
such a
just,
quick
it's
turnaround.
such a condensed schedule. And so, credit to the coaching staff for preparing a regimen for the players to have, credit to the players who are going to really be going through it during those days of camp, because you got to get ready to go, right? Games are going to start mattering in a week and 2 days, and you're going to have to be ready to go. The players that I think are going to it's probably been the most for have been the rookies, right? Because not only
Mhm.
is this your first pro camp, but it also condensed schedule. You're just really being thrown into it. They had kind of, we'll call it captain skates, kind of going back to late last week, but nothing official, nothing with coaches and the full on training camp until yesterday. If you're a rookie, it's just got to be so brutal. You're just thrown in, and it's immediately, hey, we're trying to establish a physical identity for the team. You're going up against pros that you've grown up watching, right? Olympians, all these great players. You're just thrown out there. You've got to compete with them physically. We're gonna bag skate you for 10 minutes at the end of an hour and a half practice. Oh, I'm sure that has been a lot for them.
Definitely, but I mean, talking with them today after practice, and I think of like Jenna Buglioni, right?
Yeah.
She was excited for that. She
Yes.
because you talked about the coaching staff and the standards they hold them to, but she was eager to go out there and work really hard and know what's expected of her. But like she was seemed up to the challenge.
I Jenna seems up to every challenge.
Yeah,
There's
that's
been
true.
there's yet to be an experience, it feels like, where she has not had a smile on her face and just been so all in on it. Some of the players yesterday after the bag skate were a little bit more like, yeah, we're getting back to it. Like, you know what I mean? Some of the vets who've been around, played a couple years in the PWHL already, were like, this is what it is. You got to get ready. You got to prepare your body and all of that. So, but I'm very intrigued by what we're seeing so far. I think that this team, it's interesting because coming out of the expansion draft, having the players on this team that you have, the fact that, you know, fan bases are throwing around the idea of super teams. I mean, that's what everybody called Vancouver and Seattle back at the expansion draft, was you're basically putting together these super teams for head coach Steve O'Rourke to then go out there and say, okay, I've got a roster that has as much skill as anybody, if not more. I want this team to play physical. I want them to kind of grind out games and grind out victories. It's an interesting approach to not try to just go, look at this roster and say, I got a bunch of high skilled players. Let's try to play fast. Let's try to play skilled, and let's try to win that way.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think also when you get into playoff hockey, which is really where it's going to matter, I think you see that really at every level, and I think from from any level of hockey, right? It's kind of I think the thing in fashion right now, and I just immediately think of the Florida Panthers and just how
Yes.
stacked they are talent wise, but the way that they play, where they will grind you into the dust. If you have the talent and can play that way, it can be near unstoppable.
Right. And I also wonder how much of this is, you have Hillary Knight, who is, the best power forward women's hockey has ever seen and potentially will ever see, or at least for a very long time. And having a player like that who is probably going to be captain, or at least is going to be your de facto captain for this season. Certainly, that's the way everything has been so far since the expansion draft. She has been the person that is kind of front and center, as she probably should be. That's her game, right? That's the game that she has played. And then obviously you think about a lot of the rivalry series games and Olympics and world championships between Team USA, Team Canada. They get pretty nasty, right? Like they go out there. Those are physical games. Those are hard fought games. They are not always, 6-5 finishes. There's a lot of 2-1 games in the history between those two countries. And so I think when you talk about having the level of national team players that this roster has, the way that they're used to playing, the way that they understand it takes to play when you're going up against other high levels of competition, it makes a little bit more sense. But I know it was still certainly something that it exceeded my expectations for kind of how physical this team was going to play, just based off of the roster that they had going into this camp.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned Hillary Knight and kind of building around that. Look at where the GM's from. right?
Yeah.
Megan Turner in Boston. I think it naturally kind of fits.
Yep, that it does. That it does. Looking at things, I mean, it's been a pretty fast paced camp. I think like it started off maybe a little bit slow for the first 40 minutes yesterday as everybody eased in, but for the most part, we talked about the physicality of things. There's been a lot of like today was a lot of breakout drills, a lot of full 200-foot drills and things like that. I think they're really kind of working on getting everybody into game shape just because again, you have to. That's what training camp's for, and it's got to be a pretty quick camp compared to what the NHL gets, where the Kraken had weeks to do that. You've got days, and so but it seems like everybody's on board with it. Coaching staff seems to absolutely know what they're doing when it comes to these drills. Um, there was one other thing I was gonna say, but I lost my train of thought on it. I don't know. Yeah, we don't have a lot as far as style of game, systems, things like that just don't exist because this is what I was going to say. They're still working on building chemistry, right? At the end of the day, this is an expansion franchise. And while you do have some pairs of players who played with each other previously, a lot of this is players that are new to each other and are trying to find that chemistry. And so like today they were working on breakout drills and the team could get that initial first pass from the defenders up to the forward group, but then when the forward group in the neutral zone had to make the passes between themselves, the back checkers every time were getting in those lanes, we're finding way coming up on them, stealing pucks, stealing those passes, and you could just tell that it was because they just didn't have the chemistry with each other yet, right? That forward group. It was just one of those things where they just couldn't even gain the zone because it just wasn't there. The passes were going a little too far in front or they're going a little too behind other players, or they just, were looking to certain spots and the other player was in a different spot. And so I think that that's going to be a big challenge for Seattle and Vancouver, I would imagine, just the fact that you have such a limited window before your season starts to take this group of players that many of which have never played with each other before and get them all on the same page and learn each other's habits.
Right. You have to have, I think, priorities and almost like a triage list, really, if you're Coach O'Rourke, as far as what things you want to instill first. And I'm sure you kind of have layers on that. So we haven't had the chance to talk to him. Uh,
Yeah.
Tomorrow would be the first chance the media will talk to him. But, it's hard to know without having spoken to him kind of what he views as the first priorities. Like all we can go off of what we've seen, the basic things that we've seen in training camp. But so far it all makes sense to us as far as what we've seen, but I'd be interested in more insight too from him on what he views as the levels and the steps that they need to get to, because I imagine even once the season starts it's probably still going to feel a little bit like a work in progress systems wise.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've been down this road the last couple of years with the Kraken, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anytime a new coach comes in, that is part of the struggle of training camp. And again, with this training camp being shorter than an NHL training camp, I got to imagine it's going to be that much more difficult for him and his staff and for the players and everything. So that's another thing that again I wish we could see these preseason games because I would love to see how that chemistry works and I would love to know if he puts the lines in the blender for it too, right? Looking for those pairings or at least two players that kind of show that early sign of chemistry and can play together and have that kind of shorthand with each other where they can just kind of know where each one is. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Anything else from camp and like the drills that they're doing, the way that they're playing, anything like that, RJ, before we move on to the next thing?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just the one thing is maybe the communication also, that
Hmm.
aspect, and that's something that the players are still working on. I was asking both CJ Jackson and then some of the defensemen. I asked Brownie about this and just the communication between the D and the goaltenders, things like that. Actually, the D said they had recently had like a half-hour meeting on just
Yeah.
working on that communication between the D and the goaltenders. That's the kind of thing that you just have to be building the foundations for right now, and so that's a lot of what we're seeing rather than systems per se, but just chemistry, communication, getting to know your teammates who you may not have played with before.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was a great question that you asked earlier today and got a good answer too. Um, All right. I think really for me, the last thing is kind of, looking ahead. Obviously, this weekend is going to be very important for the team. We've talked about that. I think it's going to be really interesting to hear what everybody has to say about it coming back from going up to Vancouver for these two games. It's going to be interesting to see what the scores kind of come out because, Vancouver's going through all the same things Seattle is right now, where you have that expansion team, you have that group, they're all trying to learn, how to play with each other. It's going to be really interesting to see how those games kind of go down, see if one of these teams is maybe a little bit ahead of the other in that regard. Um, hopefully, if so, hopefully Seattle is the team that's ahead on all of it. And then especially because they're going to see each other less than a week later for opening night, and that's going to be really really interesting for that game up in Vancouver on the 21st. So I got to think having two practice games, two scrimmages, two preseason games, whatever you want to call it, against the team that you're going to play opening night. I mean, that's in some ways got to be really good because you're really dialed in for what that team's doing. You're getting a chance to see what they're doing, what they're struggling with a week before you have to play them in a very meaningful game. On the other hand, they get to do that for you too. And so I would be very curious if that's something that, coaching staff is even thinking about, or if you're just focused on your own group and getting that right and using these games to just focus on what you need to work on for that final week before the regular season gets going.
I would hope it's that, just because at this point with the team, Vancouver's not going to be your entire schedule. You want to make sure you have your own stuff right. But that said, as a coaching staff, I just imagine the way that coaches think, it's near impossible to not want to at least have somewhat of a feeling out process to try and get that pre-scout on your opponent, and maybe not even show too much. Make
Hmm.
an effort to not show them too much of what you're thinking or what you can do ahead of opening night. But I think either way, it's going to be very good for the team. Like they're going to need this. They're going to need as many kind of game style reps as they could possibly get leading up to opening night. And I think it's great that they're facing Vancouver for the season opener, because that's the other team that's kind of in the same boat as they are, right? And just
Hmm.
seeing a first game in franchise history for two teams. I mean, it's been a while since, basically since year one of the PWHL since we've seen that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then of course, the week after that, Seattle will have their home opener against Minnesota, and that's gonna be a big game too. Not just because it's the home opener and everything, but of course Minnesota already building a pretty substantial legacy in the PWHL. So we'll see how that goes down for that first game at Climate Pledge for them as well. Looking kind of ahead, we mentioned Vancouver being in the same boat. I know a lot of the questions that the team answered yesterday, particularly, was around the concept of building a rivalry with them. And I think that a rivalry is going to be natural, not just and all the players basically said this too, not just because of the proximity to each other and both being in the same region, but because they were both added at the same time into the PWHL. And so you're going to have that kind of natural thing. But I thought that Danielle Serdachny had the best quote about it, which was basically that they're going to maybe have that rivalry there, but really everybody's going to be Seattle's rival this year because of how the expansion draft probably put a target on their backs. And so they're going to have that kind of league wide rivalry. And this was part of the quote from her. Other teams are not exactly happy with how the expansion draft went. So I think we've got a little bit of a target on our back. And I am very interested to see RJ, because as much as all offseason everybody's talked about the super teams and what Seattle and Vancouver were able to get and how unfair the process was, it's going to be very interesting to see how those other teams respond to them. And we'll get our first glimpse of that when Seattle hosts Minnesota for that home opener. But it is going to be very interesting to see if how much resentment is there on really both sides. Because we know, like Alex Carpenter talked about this going back to when Seattle brought her in, about the idea of not being protected and what that kind of meant for her, and kind of being, wanting to go out there and maybe prove herself again and play hard because of that. It's going to be interesting too for the other teams, the other fan bases and everything. I do think when Vancouver, Seattle are going to be playing these other teams, those fan bases they're going to be, ready for that game.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think we shouldn't, if any Seattle Torrent fans like don't kid yourselves. There's going to be a lot of animosity there
Mhm.
just based on the way the expansion draft went. You need to be ready for it
Yes.
because Seattle and Vancouver, I think, are going to be the two most hated teams in the league right off the bat. And even more so if they're good,
Hmm.
especially so if they're good.
Yeah.
And so you are going to have that dynamic where it's not normally you see with an expansion team, it's kind of a revenge game for the players playing against the former team. Oh, you didn't protect me, all that stuff. This is going to look a little different because these teams couldn't protect many players. And so I think there's maybe less of a personal side that way, but way more of a personal side for the other teams, the teams that are not Seattle and Vancouver, where there's going to be a ton of resentment. Like I think it's hard to oversell just how much resentment there's going to be from these other teams, especially if Vancouver and Seattle are as good as they seem to be on paper, which is basically the two best teams in the league on paper. Just be ready for it and be ready, especially if there's a lot of success, because that's going to breed even more resentment. And you have fun with it, but just know it's coming.
Yeah, definitely it's coming. And it's one of those things where be ready if there's the success. Be ready if these two teams kind of struggle out of the gate too, because a lot of these fan bases are going to be very happy with that. They're gonna really pounce on that. They're gonna say some things, and I think if these teams struggle, it could only be at the beginning of the season, just because everybody's trying to get to learn how to play with each other, all that stuff that we've just been talking about. So maybe there's a chance for a slow start, but I mean these teams are going to be good later on in the season. But if one of these two teams stumbles out of the gate, oh man, the rest of the league is going to want to pounce on that.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of rivalry talk really throughout the entire league. I mean, the rhetoric, the chirping, all that stuff, especially among the fans, I think is going to be at a level this year that we have not seen before in this league, and it's not even close.
Yeah, definitely. I, for one, cannot wait for it. I know you're in that same boat as well. Really looking forward to everything. Really looking forward to the rest of camp, hearing how this weekend goes for the team, and then the lead up to the regular season starting and that first game in Vancouver a week from Friday. Cannot wait for it. Can't wait for us to have more of the hockey stuff to talk about, right? Half of this podcast was brought up by the team branding, and that's all well and good, and it is exciting because it's all brand new. But I want to talk about lines. I want to talk about pairings. I want to talk about systems, right? All the stuff that I enjoy talking about with the Kraken, and then the Kraken don't always give me. I I think this team, with how good it is on paper, I think they're going to be a team that's going to be able to scratch that X's and O's itch for me.
Definitely. I know you can't wait. I know everybody listening can't wait. And we're going to have so much to talk about next time we do meet here for another episode of the Downpour
Mhm.
podcast. I mean, I can't wait to see what we have by the next episode.
Yeah, me either. But for now, that's going to do it for this inaugural episode of the Downpour. Thanks, everybody, so much for joining us for this. Can't wait to do it again. But until next time, I'll see y'all soon.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.